They didn't even bother hiding it. The transmission came through in perfect clarity. Not some cryptic ancient signal bouncing off asteroid belts like they used to send when they wanted plausible deniability. No, this one came direct. Loud, proud, and arrogant. The Galactic Accord hereby declares total war upon the species known as humanity. Those words echoed across every human outpost, satellite colony, and orbital defense grid still standing. I stood on the bridge of the bastion, staring at the transmission like I'd seen a ghost. Around me, the crew didn't flinch. Not one. We'd been expecting this. Hell, some of us had been praying for it. They never learned. We should have been extinct 50 years ago when they first came. All glowing alloys, psychic interfaces, and fleets that blacked out suns. Back then, we panicked. United Nations, scrambled militaries, chaos on Earth like the world was ending. And in a way it did. Half of our population gone in the first 2 years. Cities leveled. Skies turned grey with ash and dust. We buried billions in silence. But we adapted. We always do. I remember my father's words the night our sector lost contact with Earth. They declared war on the wrong species. At the time, I didn't understand the cold certainty in his voice. I do now. They called us ferals, primitives with too much aggression and not enough evolution. But the thing they never grasped is that aggression isn't a flaw. It's fuel. The same instinct that built empires out of mud and blood. The same rage that keeps a man fighting even when his lungs burn and his bones break. We learned their tech, hijacked it, improved it. We turned their own weapons against them and gave those polished alien admirals something they never had before, fear. And now, 50 years later, they were coming back. Confident again, arrogant again, history was about to repeat. Captain Arlen turned to me, his weathered face cracked with a grin. "Looks like they forgot what happened last time, Commander." I nodded. "Then let's remind them." The crew burst into quiet, disciplined motion. No cheering, no panic. Just calm, practiced movements. That's the thing about humans. We celebrate after the war, not before it. I pulled up the incoming fleet data on the main display. 3 carriers, 6 destroyers, and 1 Dreadnought-class command ship. All headed straight for Outpost 7 on the edge of the Theta Drift. They weren't just trying to send a message. They wanted to wipe us off the map before Earth even had time to respond. But Earth wasn't where the fight was anymore. The real war was fought out here, in the cold. Empty dark where no treaties mattered. I tapped into the encrypted comms and opened a channel to Outpost 7. The screen flickered, then settled on a grizzled face covered in scars. Smoke curling from a half-lit cigar. "Commander," he grunted, "I see we got ourselves a war again. Looks that way, Marshal. You ready?" He blew out smoke and grinned. "Son, I never stopped being ready. You just point me at the bastards." I ended the call and turned back to the crew. "Lock coordinates." Full warp jump to Outpost 7. Prepare strike formations. "Aye, sir," came the unified response. As the engines roared to life and the stars stretched into lines, I stood silent, my hands gripping the console. A familiar warmth burned in my chest. Not fear, not even anger. Resolve they thought we'd forgotten, that our scars had faded, that our weapons had rusted, but they didn't understand the truth. Humans never stop preparing for war. We just pretend we're done. And when the next wave comes, we don't beg. We don't run. We smile because we know something they don't. History doesn't favor the strongest or the most advanced. It favors the ones who refuse to die. The Bastion dropped out of warp with a shudder that rattled her frame like old bones cracking back into place. The stars snapped back into clarity, revealing the cold edge of the Theta Drift, a dead zone of space where light barely touched and no empire dared build. Except for us, Outpost 7 floated just beyond the asteroid belt, a metal monster stitched together from scraps of war and forgotten tech. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't meant to be. It was a fortress with teeth. "Status," I barked. "Outpost 7 is online. Defenses are hot. Marshal Grant's mobilizing his orbital cannons," Lieutenant Heller replied, her voice sharp and sure. I leaned forward, watching the flickering display. There they were, the enemy fleet like shadows crawling out of the void. They were slower than us, taking the scenic route, expecting their presence alone to rattle us. A common mistake. They had numbers, power, elegance, we had rage, and that would be enough. "Patch me through to their command ship," I said. Heller hesitated. "Sir, you're sure you want—" No. A moment passed. The bridge fell into silence, except for the hum of the engines and the distant clicking of targeting systems locking into place. The hologram blinked into life. There stood High Commander Ixavale of the Galactic Accord, tall, featureless, a glimmering frame wrapped in ceremonial armor that looked too delicate for battle. His eyes, if you could call them that, didn't blink, didn't move, just a flat glowing blue, human vessel. "State your surrender terms," he said, voice laced with synthetic arrogance. Their kind always sounded like that, like they'd already won. I didn't answer right away. Just stared at him for a long, cold moment. Then I leaned forward, resting both hands on the console like I was talking to a debt collector at my front door. "Ixavale," I said, 50 years ago your kind burned our cities. You butchered civilians, sterilized planets, turned our oceans black. We asked for peace. You gave us extinction. We remember every second of it." His expression didn't change. "Then you should have learned your place." I grinned. "We did. At the top, I cut the feed, sound battle stations. All weapons live. Inform Marshal Gran he's clear to engage on his mark," I ordered. "Aye, sir." Around me, the crew moved like parts of a machine, one oiled with sweat. Blood and years of surviving where no one else did. No questions. No hesitation. This wasn't a surprise attack, this was payback. The enemy fleet slowed, realigning. Their dreadnought hovered at the rear, a massive crescent-shaped vessel bristling with torpedo bays and kinetic lance cannons. In the old war, one of those things could level an entire city block from orbit in under a minute. But Outpost 7 wasn't a city. It was a trap. Marshal Gran reports heavy artillery prepped. "Waiting for your call," Hella said. I took a breath and stared at the blinking lights crawling toward us. I saw them not as ships but as gravestones. They just didn't know it yet. Light them up, and the sky caught fire. The first volley came from Outpost 7, mass drivers screaming through space like gods throwing spears. The alien fleet responded, but too slow. Their forward scout cruiser exploded before it could maneuver. A second ship veered off course, losing stabilizers as flak shredded its left engine. They're scrambling. "Defense grid effective. Marshals got their formation broken," Hella shouted over the rising volume. "Good, keep pressure on the wings. Make them bleed early." This was what humans did best. Turn chaos into strategy. Turn desperation into dominance. They were used to linear battles. Clean formations, disciplined responses. We didn't play like that. We played dirty. "Commander." "Incoming transmission from Earth Central," Hella said. "Put it through." The face that appeared was President Errol Tren, but not the kind you'd find in a suit giving speeches. No, he wore combat fatigues, sleeves rolled up, eyes bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Commander, I'm not going to waste your time. We've received intel. This isn't just an isolated push. This is a full-scale cleansing order. Galactic Accord wants us wiped, not conquered, gone permanently." "I figured," I said. "They always did like finishing what they started. We've mobilized the fleets, but you're the front line. If you can hold them here, we will." He nodded slowly. "I'm authorizing Countermeasure Protocol 7. I raised my eyebrows. "You sure about that?" "Never been more sure. If they want history to repeat, then let's remind them what made us infamous." The screen went black. I turned to Hella. "Activate Countermeasure 7. Prepare to deploy at will." Her eyes widened slightly, not in fear but respect. That protocol hadn't been touched since the last war. It was controversial, brutal. Hell, even we thought it was inhumane when it was first drafted. Now it was necessary. Below deck, I could already hear the drone bays opening, the thrum of buried technology waking up from deep sleep. Bio-laced swarm drones, banned in 3 quadrants, highly illegal, highly effective. We didn't care. A klaxon blared through the hull as the alien dreadnought finally opened fire, its twin lances cutting across the void like white-hot razors. One blast grazed our outer shield, sending a tremor through the floor. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the lights flickered. "Shields holding," Hella reported. "But we can't take more than 2 direct hits." "We won't," I turned to the weapons chief. "Release the swarm." From the belly of the bastion, hundreds of sleek obsidian drones erupted into space, zigzagging like hornets with no queen. They didn't fly in formation. They didn't broadcast signals. They moved like chaos incarnate. The aliens tried to track them. Failed. One drone slipped past their sensors and embedded itself into the engine bay of a destroyer. Then another. Then 10 more. Seconds later, the entire ship detonated from the inside out. A silent, perfect implosion. The dreadnought adjusted course, starting a slow retreat. "They're backing off," Hela said. "They didn't expect this." "They never do," I muttered. This was the part they always forgot. Humanity doesn't win wars because we're stronger, faster, or more evolved. We win because we stop caring. Morality, treaties, the line between tactics and war crimes, all of that fades when extinction's on the table. You kill one of us and we send 10 back. You threaten our home, we turn your planets into ash. We don't enjoy it, but we're better at it than anyone. Multiple ships breaking formation, pulling back to rally point, Heller said. They're signaling for reinforcements. Good, I said. Let them bring more. The dreadnought finally opened a warp gate, retreating with its remaining escorts. Cowards. They thought regrouping would buy them time. That we'd wait, they were wrong. Pursue. I shook my head. No, let them crawl back. Let them explain to their leaders why 3 destroyers were lost to 1 human ship and a scrap metal fortress. She smiled faintly. I stood in the silence that followed, staring into the black nothing where the enemy once was. All around me the bridge pulsed with quiet celebration, but no one shouted. No one cheered. They knew this wasn't the end. It was just the first crack in the dam. Later, in my quarters, I sat alone, the hum of the ship barely audible over the weight in my chest. I looked at the photo pinned to the wall, a woman and 2 boys. Gone now, 50 years gone, their deaths weren't glorious. No blaze of heroism or last stands. Just an orbital cannon that wiped out our settlement while we slept. I wasn't there. I'd been on patrol. I came back to smoke and silence. That's the thing people never understood about this war. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure we were the last species anyone ever tried to erase. A chime interrupted my thoughts. I keyed the door open. It was Hela. Sir, she said, a little softer than usual. Incoming data packet from Central. They want us to intercept the next fleet movement near Vega 9. Intel says it'll be larger, heavier. I nodded. We'll go, she lingered. You okay, Commander? I looked her dead in the eyes. Do I look like someone who's ever been okay? She didn't answer. Just nodded and left. Smart girl. Out in the void, the stars kept on spinning. Somewhere far beyond the drift, the enemy was regrouping, whispering about the humans who smiled when war was declared. The ones who didn't flinch. Let them whisper, let them fear, because the galaxy just remembered what we are. And next time, we wouldn't wait for them to fire first. I didn't sleep. Never really could after a battle. Even in the quiet of my quarters, even when the ship went dark and the noise faded, there was always something crawling beneath the skin. A hum that wouldn't stop, like your blood hadn't got the message that the fight was over, but it never really was. Not out here. The call from Central came 4 hours later. A short transmission, coordinates, briefing codes, one word at the end that stood out above the rest. Extermination. I sat back in my chair and stared at the flickering light on the console. That word wasn't used lightly. The Accord had sent a cleansing fleet. No peace offerings, no prisoners. Just purging. They were still calling it a war. But this wasn't a war anymore, this was survival. I gathered the crew in the command deck. No speeches, no lies. Just truth. They're coming in full force. Vega 9, 48 hours. Central wants us there first. We're not holding the line. We're not defending anything. We're hunting. There was no panic, no hesitation, just nods. These men and women had seen worse. They knew what was coming, and they weren't afraid of it. We prepped the ship for silent travel, low-emission warp, cold-run systems. We weren't flying in guns blazing. Not this time. This time we were going to bleed them before they even knew we were there. The Bastion wasn't built for stealth, but we'd learned to improvise. She groaned as her core dimmed. Shields fell and the hull cooled until we blended in with the void. On scanners, we were nothing more than another piece of floating debris. Warp trajectory set, Hela said. 1 jump. Estimated arrival 31 hours, I nodded. Engage. Space bent and we vanished. We arrived on the outer edge of Vega 9's gravitational pull, riding blind just beyond the reach of long-range sensors. The planet itself was an old mining world, long abandoned by both humans and the Accord after the last war. Dead, cracked terrain, toxic storms, nothing left worth saving, which made it perfect for what was about to happen. We launched recon drones, keeping our signals tight and silent. They drifted through the dark like ghosts, feeding back everything they saw, and what they saw wasn't good. A fleet, not a scouting party this time. Not some symbolic show of power. 32 ships, 3 dreadnoughts, 2 carriers, ground siege units, orbital payloads. They were building a forward command station right above the ruins of the old Vega mining facility. They were setting up for long-term occupation. This wasn't just an extermination order. It was colonization. "They're building the next purge point," Hela whispered, staring at the data feed. "From here they could hit 4 other systems in less than a week." I didn't answer. I already knew what had to be done. We couldn't wait for Earth to approve a counterstrike. Command could debate protocol all they wanted. From here on, we were making decisions. Our own way. We had a single ship and 24 crew. They had 32 ships and orbital. Superiority. We still had the advantage because while they were building command posts and prepping troop drops, we'd already fought this kind of war before. We didn't attack from the front. We bled them from the inside. "Phase 1, I said, staring down at the map. Hela nodded. "Drone infiltration ready. We have weak points in 3 of their external hangars. If we plant payloads there, they'll detonate mid-resupply," I finished. "Buy us time. Cut their numbers." Weapons Chief Rodan leaned forward, scars across his jaw twitching. "And the rest?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "We board the dreadnought." They froze. "Just for a second." I let that silence hang. "I'm not asking for volunteers. We go in hard. We breach the command deck and we take it from the inside. Once we have control of their communications, we'll fake a panic order. Make the rest of the fleet think they're under full-scale attack. With enough chaos, the swarm will do the rest." Rodan cracked his knuckles. "About damn time." We launched 3 pods masked to look like asteroid fragments. Each carried a dozen drone charges and a small EM cloaking field. They floated right into the open hangars of the lower fleet. Their scanners picked up nothing. Less than an hour later, 3 destroyers lit up in silent detonations, flame without sound, fire without screams. Just blinking wreckage and drifting corpses. That was the price of ignorance. The fleet scrambled. Ships pulled into formation. Automated defenses lit up. They went on full alert, but they weren't ready for what came next. Me and 9 others launched in the Bastion's belly skiff, low signal, armor-piercing. Not built for comfort, just survival. We flew blind through the outer scan net, riding the edge of the blast residue from our detonations. It masked our heat signature long enough to reach the underside of the dreadnought's venting system. We attached magnet clamps and began the breach. Cutting into the hull of an enemy flagship isn't clean work. You're not slicing through butter. You're carving through layers of metal designed to withstand nuclear strikes. By the time we broke through, we were already sweating through our suits. The corridor on the other side was dark, empty. These ships didn't run like ours. No manual patrols, no human security. They relied on AI response teams and pressure sensors. We fed them false readings, masked our oxygen output. One wrong breath and the whole ship would light up. We made it to the central lift in 7 minutes. 2 more and we were inside the command chamber. The keyed. Accord officers didn't even have time to scream. Their high commander, this one named Therison, reached for some kind of neural override implant. Rodan put a blade through his throat before he could blink. They had better tech, we had instincts. One by one, we secured the chamber. Locked the doors. Overrode the internal systems. Then I walked up to the comms station and stared at the blinking controls. They were in some alien language, all lines and curves and glowing symbols. I didn't need to read it. I just pressed the ones that looked red. The entire fleet lit up with emergency beacons. Automated messages flooded their bridge systems. Distress calls. Phantom attacks, internal reactor breaches. On their screens, it looked like every ship in the fleet had been compromised. They scattered. Some fired at each other, others ran. That was all we needed. Back on the Bastion, Hela dropped the swarm. Thousands of drones screamed through space, guided only by rage and raw programming. They weren't surgical. They weren't clean. They latched onto engines, hulls, and cockpits, ripping everything apart like wolves in 0G. By the time we launched back from the dreadnought and docked with the Bastion, 22 ships were wreckage. 5 were fleeing, only 1 remained, the dreadnought itself. It floated silently now, No crew, no orders, no power, just another dead god in the graveyard of arrogance. We left Vega 9 in silence, no messages, no declarations. We let the wreckage do the talking. Back on the bridge, I stood with my crew, bloodied, burned, exhausted, but breathing. The stars stretched ahead of us like open wounds. Where to now? Rawdon asked. I stared into the dark. Wherever they run. They thought we'd stop. That after Vega 9, after we tore through their dreadnought like it was made of paper and scattered their fleet across half a sector, we'd fall back, regroup, lick our wounds they didn't understand. We weren't interested in defense anymore. We were hunting. The Bastion had scars now, black burns across her forward plating, twisted armor along her port side, where a lance round had grazed us during exfil. She wasn't pretty before, but now she looked downright monstrous, which suited us just fine. Monsters don't wait for orders. They don't beg for peace. They just keep moving. The signal came from one of the outer recon outposts, an emergency beacon buried so deep in subspace it took us 6 hours to crack it. When it finally played, there was no voice, just static and screaming, human screaming, buried under the hiss of plasma fire and the high-pitched screech of alien sonic rounds. Then, silence. Outpost 12 was gone. They'd left no survivors this time. No signs of resistance, just heat signatures on scorched ground and melted weapons platforms. They didn't just want to kill us. They wanted to erase us. I stood in front of the crew that night in the dim blue light of the war room, staring at the projection of the ruined outpost. We're not just targets anymore, I said. We're trophies. Heller crossed her arms. They're trying to bait us. They already did. No one disagreed. The outpost wasn't even strategic. It was a science station. 27 souls, no threat. No weapons, just families, engineers. My brother. I hadn't even known he was stationed there. Didn't matter now. Grief was a luxury I didn't have room for anymore. Out here, grief got you killed. Turned your aim sloppy. Your orders delayed, so I buried it. Like I'd buried everything else. The trail led us toward the Liskar Run, a hyperspace corridor flanked by ancient asteroid fields and abandoned refueling stations. Dangerous territory, too narrow for most fleets. One mistake and you'd end up scraping your hull across a mile of jagged iron rock. But the enemy was cutting through it like it was open sky. They were getting bolder. More confident or desperate didn't matter. We would follow. Heat signatures at Station D, Heller reported. 5 ships, medium-class, escort squad maybe. I leaned forward. Weapons hot? Armed but not engaged. Looks like they're scanning for remnants. Scavengers, cleanup crews, the ones who came after the purge to ensure no humans had crawled out of the rubble. Bring us in slow. No lights. Passive scanners only, I ordered. We'll drift with the asteroid belt. Make it look like debris. We slipped into the field like shadows, gliding past frozen husks of broken ships, relics from the First War, their skeletons still haunted by memories of fire and silence. The enemy ships hovered over the wreckage of the refueling station, drones buzzing out from their bellies, scooping up tech, bodies, whatever was left. They didn't see us coming. Rawdon launched the harpoons first, magnet-laced, high speed, pierced the hull of the lead ship before it even flared its shields. The charge blew 5 seconds later, slicing the ship in half with an internal detonation that ripped through its reactor. 2 more went into defensive formation. Too late. The Bastion powered on in a surge of red and gold, shields snapping into place, cannons roaring to life. We tore through their side flank, leaving burning wreckage and tumbling corpses in our wake. The last ship tried to run. We let it. Not out of mercy, out of strategy. We tagged it with a parasite drone. It would ride their hull, feeding us locations, patterns, intel. They thought they'd escaped. They were just dragging us closer to the heart of their command. 2 days later, the drone fed us coordinates. The Accord had set up a mobile command base in the ruins of HFY 4, an old alien moon once shared between 3 species, none of whom survived the last war. Now it was a graveyard, soaked in radiation and regret, fitting place for a slaughter. The command base wasn't massive, but it was fortified. They'd deployed planet-side defenses, shield towers and air-to-orbit flak cannons. They weren't expecting visitors. They sure as hell weren't expecting us. We didn't go in loud this time, we dropped in low. Atmospheric insertion with modified jumpsuits. the old kind with no safety rails or computer-guided steering. Just wind, velocity, and a solid pair of nerves. We hit ground hard, 30 clicks out from their compound. The air burned, literally. I could feel the radiation biting into my exposed jaw through the helmet seal. Hella landed beside me, coughing blood into her filter. Rawdon touched down on a jagged rock ledge. Legs first, rolling to absorb the shock. 10 of us against a compound. Built to repel planetary assault. Perfect. Odds we moved under the cover of the storms. High frequency. Winds that messed with sensors and cloaked our approach. Every inch forward was hell. Jagged terrain, acidic rain, gusts strong enough to knock a man off a ridge if he wasn't paying attention. But we moved. No complaints. No fear, we were too far gone for that now. By nightfall, we reached the outer shield gate. 2 guards, Rawdon handled them with knives, quick, quiet. I hacked the access panel, feeding in corrupted Accord code we'd stolen during the Dreadnought breach. The gate opened with a reluctant hiss. We moved inside. The compound was clinical, sterile. White walls, clean lines, like a hospital made for ghosts. We found the war room on the 3rd level. 12 officers. They didn't stand a chance. We left the commander alive. Barely. I knelt beside him as he gurgled through a punctured lung, trying to activate some kind of distress beacon implanted in his wrist. I crushed it under my boot. He wheezed something in his language, probably a plea, maybe a curse, didn't matter. "You think this is war?" I said, leaning in close. "You haven't seen war yet." Then I shot him twice. We pulled all the data we could, star maps, deployment routes, target lists, and something worse. They'd marked over 30 additional human outposts for annihilation, not even military sites, just colonies, refugee ships, medical hubs. They weren't fighting us, they were cleansing us, erasing us again, and they thought we'd just roll over like the first time. As we exfiltrated back to the bastion, I looked up at the moon's broken skyline, ash and black fire, and I felt nothing, not triumph, not relief, just that old familiar fire. Crawling up my spine, we were going to burn them, all of them, back on the bastion. We dumped the data into Central's dark net, encrypted burst relay straight into Earth's war core. Tren would see it. Command would know, but even if they didn't act, we would. Rawdon came to me after debrief. "You realize what this means, right?" I looked up from the reports. "They're not going to stop," he said. "Not unless someone makes them afraid again." I nodded. "Then let's be fair." There were no medals, no parades, no songs waiting for us. Just the hum of the bastion's engines, the cold drip of recycled air and the stink of blood. Some of it ours, most of it not. Rawdon was right. This wasn't about defense anymore. We were done reacting, done waiting for orders from Earth that came too late, or didn't come at all. The Accord wanted humanity gone. Not because we posed a threat, but because they remembered what we'd done last time. They feared a repeat. That's why they'd launched their cleansing campaigns in silence, why they targeted the weak. First, the forgotten. They were trying to erase our memory from the galaxy, but they'd made one fatal mistake. They left survivors, and survivors don't forget. We moved fast after Ashari 4, no more hiding, no more sneaking through dead zones. We pushed hard into Accord-controlled territory, using every backdoor and shadow path we'd memorized during the First War. These were old routes, ones the Accord thought had collapsed after their mining detonations. They were wrong. Hela kept us off-grid by cycling our ID signals every 4 hours. Rawdon wired a rotating jamming field around, the ship that made us invisible to long-range scans unless someone was looking right at us. We weren't just slipping through cracks anymore. We were dragging knives behind us. 1 week in, we intercepted a low-priority freighter carrying medical supplies to a forward Accord base. It was unarmed, small crew, mostly civilians. I gave them the option to stand down. They opened fire. It lasted 47 seconds. I walked the corridor of that ship afterward, stepping over broken bodies, scorched consoles, and the acrid stink of melting skin. One of their crew had been a youngling, small, barely trained. I found him curled up near the storage bay, still holding his weapon like it would save him. It hadn't. Rawdon found me there, silent. "Commander?" he said, not asking what I was thinking. Just if I was still in it, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The boy's weapon had a human jawbone, carved into the handle. They weren't just fighting us. They were glorifying our deaths. Left the body where it lay. We reached the Marrow Belt next, a twisted stretch of rogue moons, dead planets, and mining wreckage orbiting a collapsed star. It was supposed to be neutral territory. That was a lie. Accord ships had built outposts on the inner ring, hidden beneath the crust of hollowed asteroids. From there, they were launching hit-and-run attacks on refugee vessels fleeing the purge zones. No defenses, no military escorts, just families. We monitored one such strike from a distance. Didn't engage, not yet. A colony transport, massive, slow, patched together with spare parts, drifted through the belt at half speed. We watched from the shadows. 3 Accord skimmers emerged from the black. Their first volley took out the transport's engines. No warning, no comms. They circled it like hyenas, cutting through its hull one section at a time, peeling it apart to make the deaths last longer. Hella turned to me, fists clenched, lips pale. "They're civilians." I said nothing, just stared. Rawdon growled, "We going to sit on our hands again?" I waited, then finally I said, "We don't save the weak." "Not anymore." They went quiet, confused, maybe disappointed until I finished. "We make sure there's no enemy left to hurt them again." And with that, I turned to weapons. All batteries. "Unleash everything," the Bastion screamed as her weapons lit up. We didn't fire surgical shots. We didn't target engines or comms. We aimed for the heart. One skimmer evaporated mid-maneuver, turning into a burning cloud of alloy and blood. The second tried to break formation. A plasma round caught it dead center. The third got close enough to fire a counter-volley. It missed, we didn't. Within 5 minutes, the belt was silent again. The refugee ship was crippled, hull breached. Radiation leaking, but they were alive. We hailed them. No response. We watched them drift. The decision sat in my throat like glass. "Do we help them?" Heller asked. I closed my eyes. "No, we give them what they really need." "What's that?" "Vengeance." We docked with the crippled vessel. No suits, no masks. Just armed men and women, walking through the silence of death and trauma. We found 40 survivors out of 600. Most of them children. Their parents had shielded them from the blast zones, sacrificing themselves so they could crawl into sealed corners and cry in the dark. We didn't offer condolences, we offered them rifles, some too small to hold them right, some too afraid to touch them. But one boy, maybe 10, maybe younger. He took his and didn't flinch. He stared at me like he understood. He didn't want saving, he wanted to fight. We gave them a choice. Stay, be escorted to one of the last standing human havens, or come with us and make sure this never happened again. 39 left on our evac ship, 1 stayed. The boy. We gave him a name. Not a real one, that was lost. But something else. Nox, a name to carry forward. A name to be feared. We moved deeper into Accord space, following encrypted transmissions from their own fallen commanders. Messages we'd intercepted during our boarding runs. We learned where their admirals met. We found where they slept, and we burned it all. Town one by one, no mercy. It wasn't long before we stopped being ghosts. We became a storm. They gave us a name in their language, hard to pronounce, even harder to forget. Roughly translated, the fire that never dies. Some tried to run, some surrendered. We executed both. This wasn't politics. This wasn't diplomacy. This was war without filters, without chains, without the lies we used to tell ourselves about being the better species. We weren't better. We were just worse in the right direction. Back on the Bastion, Knox cleaned his rifle every night, didn't speak much, didn't smile. He'd watch the others with the cold silence of someone who'd already seen too much. I didn't stop. Didn't try to save him. He didn't need that. He needed to become exactly what the Accord feared most. Human who had nothing left to lose. Word finally came from Earth. President Tren. He looked tired, grayer, older than he had any right to be. "Commander," he said, "they've pulled back from 6 sectors. Unconfirmed reports of Accord High Command consolidating in their core worlds. You've done more damage in a month than our entire fleet did in a year. Then let us keep going." He hesitated. "Some on the council believe this is a step too far, that we should open peace talks now that they're hurting." "They're not hurting yet," I growled. "They're limping." "There's a difference." Tren looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, How far are you willing to go? I leaned in close to the screen. You remember what they did to our cities, Mr. President? Our children? Our oceans? He nodded, eyes dim. Then you already know the answer. By the time we reached the outskirts of their core worlds, the stars themselves seemed to recoil from our presence. Accord space wasn't like ours. It wasn't broken. It wasn't desperate. It was beautiful. Symmetrical, pristine. Their planets orbited in perfectly engineered harmony. Their cities floated above oceans of crystal blue gas. They'd built their empire on order, but it was all built on our corpses. Every planet, every system, each had its history rewritten, the old wars whitewashed, the extermination of Earth's colonies buried beneath political treaties and manufactured peace. They thought if they erased our version of the story, it would stop being true. We were about to remind them that the truth doesn't die with silence. It just gets angrier. We had intel now, real, confirmed data from the prisoners we didn't kill. Their central communications hub was orbiting a gas giant named Valenor, protected by an outer defense ring and 3 escort fleets. Taking it head-on would be suicide, so we didn't. We crashed into it from underneath. The bastion came in at an angle no ship should have survived, slicing through the atmosphere of Valenor's outer ring, our hull burning red-hot, shields crackling. Everything screaming like hell was trying to claw its way in. We hit the lower comm station like a meteor. 4 of our lower decks buckled. 2 crew died on impact. We didn't stop. Rawdan led the breach team, carving through the station's inner sanctum with brute force and plasma cutters. The Accord had built their network with arrogance, layers of encryption, auto-targeting defenses, AI firewalls, but no redundancy. Break the hub, and the entire network went blind. So we broke it. The comm station detonated from the inside, sending out a signal across Accord space. A single, undeniable truth. Humanity was here and we were coming. 3 days later, the Accord retaliated. Hard .8 cruisers came for us near the Duran Belt. A full armada. No more skirmishes. No more cleanup squads. They were finally treating us like a threat. We baited them into the belt, then collapsed a chain of gravity mines we'd planted a week before. 5 ships torn apart. Instantly, the rest retreated into a kill box. Hela called it surgical slaughter. I called it a good day, but not without cost. We lost Rawdan. The bastard took a lance beam straight through the gut and still managed to drag a detonator into the enemy command ship before it blew. Didn't scream, didn't flinch. He just smiled before the flames swallowed him. That's how humans die, angry and useful. We gave him a burial in the cold. No ceremony. Just a long silence as his body drifted into the void, wrapped in a tattered human flag scorched black from the war. Nox stood beside me, still too young to understand what death should mean, but old enough to not look away. You don't cry? He asked. No, I said. I burn. 2 days later, we got a ping from Central, not a command. A warning. The Accord had built something, not a weapon. A message. They'd launched a public broadcast across all their inner systems. Images of what they claimed was Bastion wreckage. My body or a clone of it. Torn and bloodied, nailed to the hull of a captured ship. They called it the end of the human plague. The feed lasted 46 seconds before we hijacked it and replaced it with footage of our real location, showing their lies. We sent it back across the same networks they used. Under the video, we added 1 sentence. You still don't understand. You can't kill what's already dead. Their civilian systems collapsed in panic. Trade routes shut down. Civil disorder spread across half their outer colonies. They called us terrorists, savages, uncivilized. But the truth was simpler. We were ghosts of the people they tried to erase, and we were rewriting the end of their story. We pressed into Vale Nexus, the 3rd ring of their inner world defense grid, and that's when things started to change. They didn't send fleets anymore. They sent experiments. We caught the first one boarding an abandoned trade barge we'd intercepted, 7 feet tall. No face, no voice, just limbs and teeth. It tore through 3 of our best before we even realized it was alive. We put it down with concentrated plasma, 10 rounds to the chest, 3 to the head, and it still twitched for 5 more seconds. Nox was the one who got the kill shot, didn't flinch. Just walked up, raised the rifle and pulled the trigger. He was 11. The autopsy showed cybernetic organs, neural warfare implants, and a spinal core that matched no known species. It wasn't a soldier, it was a lab-grown weapon. The Accord was desperate. How they'd started making monsters. Not from there, enemies from themselves. That's when I realized this war had already gone. Further than the last. This wasn't just a second round of the same fight. This was the final one. They were no longer trying to win. They were trying not to lose everything. We launched an encrypted call to Central again. I didn't speak to President Tren this time. I spoke to someone else, darker, quieter, a man whose name I was never given, just a voice. We're close, I told him. We're inside their borders now. We can finish this. What are you asking for? He said. Authorization to deploy the Black Protocol, silence on the other end. Then, if we approve that, there's no coming back. We're not coming back anyway. The line cut 12 hours later. A single data burst hit our mainframe. Encrypted. Tagged approved. The Black Protocol was humanity's last sin. A classified retaliatory operation developed during the First War, buried after the treaties. A weapon so vile that Earth's own council had agreed never to speak of it again. We built it in secret. We deployed it in silence. We never admitted it existed until now. It was never a bomb, not really, it was worse. A viral AI. Construct designed to piggyback off the Accord's own interplanetary infrastructure, infect their core systems, override bio-networked defense grids, hijack their medical AI, their ships, their food synthesizers. It didn't kill quickly, it killed efficiently. By the time the first Accord capital ship turned its guns inward, firing on its own cities, the virus had already jumped systems. They tried to wipe it, they couldn't, because the code wasn't foreign. It was theirs, twisted, rewritten, weaponized by us. We didn't destroy their planets, we made them destroy themselves, and we watched. Not out of cruelty, but out of memory. Because this is what they did to us, they made us watch. As our cities burned, as our families screamed, as our history was turned to ash, now it was their turn to remember. We saw never landed on their homeworld. We didn't need to. They surrendered before we arrived, or at least what was left of them. The Accord dissolved within weeks. Its High Council committed ritual self-deletion, some cowardly cultural thing they called ending the echo. A nice way of saying they took the easy way. Out, we didn't chase the remnants, we let them scatter. Because sometimes letting your enemies live in fear is more effective than burying them. We returned to neutral space, what was left of it. The bastion was nearly unrecognizable now, covered in new plating. Scars over scars, systems patched with stolen Accord tech. And Nock sat in my chair. He was older now, taller, sharper. He looked like a soldier, acted like one. Too, I walked in and he stood immediately. You're in command now. I asked. Only while you were gone, he said. I grunted. You think this is over? He shook his head. No, not yet, I nodded. Good. Because the galaxy didn't need peace, it needed to remember what happens when you declare war on the wrong species. I used to think war ended when the enemy was dead. That's what they teach you when you're young. That justice is measured in body counts, and peace comes when the last gun falls silent. But they don't tell you what happens after. They don't talk about the ghosts that follow you back. They don't mention that once the killing stops, you're left alone with the man you became, and sometimes that man is worse than the war ever was. It had been 2 months since the Accord fell. The once proud empire that spanned a third of the galaxy was now a scattered swarm of terrified species, fractured coalitions, and aimless fleets drifting in lawless space. No one claimed victory. No one wanted it. We didn't raise a flag. We didn't celebrate. We just stopped shooting. Not because we had mercy, but because there was no one left to kill. We'd done it. We made the galaxy remember what humanity really was. Not victims. Not primitives, but predators. And predators don't mourn. They move. The bastion was docked now, floating in orbit above a dead moon, one of ours. A cold, barren rock we'd turned into a temporary station to regroup, to breathe, to figure out what came next. Not peace. Never peace. Just silence. The crew was smaller now. We'd started with 50. Ended with 14, no ceremony for the dead. No names carved into hulls. Just empty bunks and blood-stained chairs. Knox had taken up permanent residence in the war room. He didn't speak unless he had to. Sat there cleaning his rifle, staring at the star maps like he was waiting for someone to ask him where to strike next. He was only 12 now. 12, and already twice the soldier I'd ever been. I should have been proud, but all I felt was guilt, because I made him this way. No, we all did. A message came through one morning. Scrambled, erratic, full of static. Took Heller half a day to decrypt it. An Accord survivor fleet, 30 ships, no weapons, no escorts. Carrying wounded refugees, mostly civilians. They weren't heading toward us. They were trying to escape what remained of their own people. Some rogue factions, former. Accord warlords had taken control of fringe systems and begun executing survivors for failure to defend the Empire. The old Empire was eating itself alive. And this fleet? They were just trying to outrun the teeth. Heller brought it to me on a data slate. They're transmitting in a civilian dialect, she said. Asking for safe passage. I looked at the blinking coordinates for a long time. Do they know it's us? No. I don't think anyone knows we're still out here. They're unarmed. She hesitated. As far as we can tell. I handed the slate back. Plot a course. Knox was waiting for me in the corridor outside. You're going after them? He asked. I am. You planning to help them? I stopped. Looked at him. His face went still too young, too scarred, too steady. That calm, dead look in his eyes that only boys who've lost everything carry. They're civilians. I said. So were the ones they burned. He wasn't wrong, but I was tired of being right. We reached them 2 days later. They were drifting slow, their fleet staggered and wounded. Power signatures were low, shields offline. Their main cruiser had half its hull exposed to space, probably scavenged for parts. We hailed them. They didn't answer, until the third call. Then a flickering image appeared. An alien woman, skin pale and shimmering, eyes wide with fear. Her voice shook. Please, don't fire. We have wounded, children. We're not part of what the Accord did. We just want to leave. There was silence on the bridge. You could have heard a heartbeat. I glanced at Knox. His jaw was tight. His hand hovered near his sidearm, waiting. I turned back to the screen. You know who we are? She nodded slowly. The fire that never dies, and... She swallowed. You have every reason to hate us, to kill us, but I'm begging you. Don't. I stared at her, saw the cracks beneath the fear, the weariness. The same look I'd seen on human faces 1,000. Times survivors, not soldiers, not monsters, just people who ran from the fire, the same way we boarded their main cruiser. No, weapons drawn. We stepped into the stench of desperation, bodies lying in corridors. Some wounded, some already gone, children crying, hair recyclers coughing thick dust into the vents. There was no trap, no ambush, just exhaustion. Their people watched us like ghosts, waiting for the first shot, but it didn't come. Knox walked beside me, his rifle slung but not raised. He stared at them, the sick, the weak, the broken, and said nothing. One little girl, no older than 6, stumbled out of a side room and stood in front of him. She looked at his scars, then hugged him. He froze, didn't return it, didn't push her away, just stood there. When she let go, he turned and walked back to the ship without a word. We gave them supplies, fuel, medical aid, spare parts. Heller rigged a new power core for their life support systems. And I gave the captain one piece of advice. Run as far as you can, I said. And if you hear humans are coming, make sure you're not flying Accord colors, she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure I deserved it. Later, back in the war room, I sat across from Knox. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the map. Then he said, quietly, if we let them live, does that make us weak? No, I said. That makes us human, he nodded slowly, then added, I don't know if I want to be human anymore. That cut deeper than any weapon ever could. We received another message the next morning. This one wasn't a request for mercy, it was a warning. Earth Command had declared a ceasefire at official broadcast across all systems. The war was over. We were to return, decommission the Bastion, disband, forget. Just like that. Like we hadn't seen hell. Like we hadn't become something unrecognizable to survive it. I stood on the bridge and looked at my crew, these ones who were left, the ones who'd bled, burned, Killed not for glory, but because they were told we don't die quietly. Now, Earth wanted to file it all away, pretend we were done, that we could go back to cities and politics and parades. I turned off the transmission, looked out into the void, and said, "No." I didn't respond to Earth command. Not the first time, not the second, not the third. Each transmission came with more formality, more demands. Return for debrief. Submit ship logs. Cease all offensive activity. Cease it. All sounded like begging dressed in protocol, like they were scared of us. Now, and maybe they should have been, because the Bastion wasn't the same ship that left Earth orbit a year ago. And I wasn't the same man. Neither was Nox. He stood at the viewport most nights, staring at the stars like he wanted to hurt them. There was something unspoken between us now, a growing shadow that stretched longer each day. Not anger, not rebellion, something colder, a silence that asked, now what? We'd killed the monsters. We'd buried the Empire. We'd become what they feared. But we didn't feel whole because maybe revenge isn't supposed to heal. Maybe it just leaves you standing in a graveyard you built yourself, wondering if the last enemy you need to kill is the one inside your head. We drifted in deep space for another 3 weeks, beyond the reach of any known system, orbiting a dead star whose light had gone out centuries ago. We called it the Burn, the only place left quiet enough for the truth. Hela came to me during the second week. File in hand, you need to see this. She dropped the hollow slate on the table and let it play. Footage from Earth cities rebuilt. Flags flying. Children laughing. Politicians shaking hands. It looked clean, safe, normal, but it wasn't. Because below that footage was another layer. Encrypted files from Earth's intelligence division. Black. Sites interrogation programs. Biological C. Development projects. Based on our tactics, she said. Our war. They're replicating what we did. Turning it into doctrine. I stared at it for a long time. They're not trying to bring us home, I said. They're trying to erase the proof of what they turned us into. She nodded slowly. They want the war, but not the people who fought it. They'd weaponized our legacy, cut out the parts that bled, kept the fire, buried the scars. Nox came in while the feed was still playing. He watched in silence, then looked at me. They're no different than the Accord, he said, and I had no argument. We got our final message from Earth. 2 days later. It wasn't a request, it was a threat. Stand down, or be treated as a rogue faction. They were ready to send ships against us, against the men and women who saved them, and for a moment, I almost understood. We were dangerous. We were unfiltered, unsupervised, untouchable. We didn't answer to Earth anymore. Hell, we barely answered to ourselves. So I gathered the crew. All 13 of them. What was left of us? Some had been with me from the first jump. Some had joined during the bloodbath. A few were just ghosts wearing uniforms, but they all stood, waiting. Earth wants to clean house, I said. They want to rewrite this war. Make it neat. Erase the parts that made them uncomfortable. I looked at each, face tired, hardened, quiet. Won't be part of it. I held up the command slate. This ship doesn't belong to Earth anymore. Silence, then. Hela spoke, then who does it belong to? I turned toward the stars. To the fire. We jumped systems, not back home, but outward, farther than any human ship had ever gone, into the Veil expanse, an uncharted quadrant buried in radiation storms and old war wreckage. No maps, no outposts, just dark ancient silence. It was a place they'd forgotten, which made it perfect. Nox came to me during the third cycle. You have a plan? He asked. Maybe. I want in. You already are. He nodded, sat across from me. Then pulled something from his jacket, a patch, frayed, blood-stained, old, the original Earth insignia, long before the war, before the purges, before the treaties. He set it on the table. What do we do now? He asked. I looked at the patch, then at the map, and answered honestly. We build something better. The Veil expanse was full of forgotten tech, remnants from extinct species, derelict satellites, war debris that never made it into history books. We salvaged, rewired, repurposed. We weren't just a crew anymore. We were a new beginning. Not for peace, not for politics, for truth. We would be the reminder that when the galaxy decides to erase the inconvenient, there will always be someone watching. They came for us a year later, a fleet, human-made, shiny, sterile, led by a warship called The Resolute, built from the bones of the Bastion's blueprints, irony. At its finest, they hailed us, we didn't answer. They fired a warning shot, we responded with proof, a data burst, filled with classified footage, the real war. The Black Protocol, the civilian massacres, the betrayal, the silence. We sent it to every open channel, military, civilian, foreign, no spin, no filter. Just raw, bloody history. Then we vanished, back into the dark. They called us a myth after that. Some said we died in the veil, some said we turned mercenary. Others believed we became something worse. A force that haunted the edges of war, punishing the liars who dared rewrite the truth. I didn't correct them, because the truth wasn't for the powerful. It was for the survivors, for the ones left behind, for the ones who were told to shut up and smile while history was rewritten. We weren't here to be heroes, we were here to remember, and to make sure they never forgot. Final. Log entry, Commander. They thought declaring war on humanity was a mistake. It was. But not because we were strong, not because we were smart, because we were stubborn, because we refused to go extinct. Quietly, because we taught the galaxy one final truth. Some fires were never meant to die, and we were one of them.